The Economic Alliance presents the Gulf Coast Growth Show, recording from the Shell Studio, with your hosts, Jason Lee and Clint Aiken. Our mission is to highlight stakeholders and activities that drive the Houston Port Region's economy.
And we're back with the Gulf Coast Growth Show today, and we've actually taken the show on the road, which is a first for us. We're actually in Beaumont in the back room of a Papados, which I can't say is it's definitely a first for us, but quite exciting. And I'm actually here with Congressman Babin and his son Leif Babin. Congressman runs the 36th district here of Texas, and Leif, if you've not heard, is a co-author of a phenomenal book called Extreme Ownership. It's actually paramount. It's life-changing for a number of folks, as well as the co-founder for Echelon Front. They do leadership training all throughout the world. So excited to have you gentlemen on the show today. We're going to make this a quick and simple podcast. We're going to cover a few basic things today, talking a lot about some of the legislation that's taking place right now that's helping our port region, driving and fueling the economy here in the great state of Texas. Some of the work that's been done and is in the forefront here in the next 12 months, and so we're excited to hear what you have to say about that. We're going to talk a little bit about trade and the impact of trade. So there's been some significant things that have taken place just recently here in January, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to share about national security. So there's a lot of talk in the news about that, and we've got some great people here to give us some expert opinions, some ideas, and so we couldn't be more excited about the show today and having you gentlemen on. So thank you so much for joining us today. We'll dive in, and again, it wouldn't be a show on the Gulf Coast Growth Show if we didn't actually talk a little bit about leadership and development, and who better to talk about leadership than the guys who've spent their lives serving our country, sacrificing for our country, and we want to thank you for that as well. So with that being said, let's dive right in. Congressman, there's been some stuff going on behind the scenes. I know our audience would love to hear about that. Big ticket item in our region is the ship channel widening and what's taking place with that. So tell us a little bit about some of the great news that we've heard, and then also some of the work that's being done when it comes to the legislation that's going on to help support our port.
Absolutely. There are some big things that are going on. We've been working on widening and deepening at the ship channel for a number of years now. And having served on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and representing 4 ports, Johnson Space Center, and a huge swath of transportation and the energy epicenter of America right there in my District 36. It's been a great challenge to try to maintain this great economy that we have going, but we've got some good news. The president has been working extremely hard on trade deals. He's got a great cadre of people who have been out, doing the negotiations with Mexico and Canada on USMCA, with China. And we've got a Phase 1 Chinese agreement already, so we'll talk about those in a minute. But as far as the Houston Ship Channel goes, we've seen what happens when you have a 52-mile-long ship channel, and that's only a little over 500 feet wide, and we have enormous vessels that are coming back and forth, and it's supposed to be a two-way channel. And yet, when we're getting some of these great big container vessels, some of them over 1,000 feet long, and I think in their wisdom, the Houston pilots and the people who are in charge of security and safety have been wise at saying that when these big ships come in, that you got to go down to one-way traffic, and of course that is an enormous obstacle for the nation's busiest port. And when you have container vessels coming in, suddenly you don't have the ships that are carrying energy going out or coming in.
Right.
And so that's been a big problem. So the answer to the problem is funding for widening and deepening. Our channel needs to have the width that will enable perpetual two-way traffic, and the dredging that's going to enable our deep draft vessels to start coming in, and Panamax ships that can come through the Panama Canal and keep the commerce going, and rightfully so, because Houston, like I said, is the epicenter of energy in the world, and also now becoming an enormous participator in container vessels and freight of all types. I want to announce that the Houston Ship Channel will receive from the Trump administration $1.3 million in funding from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Nice.
For their 2020 work plan. I'm very proud to announce this. And then on top of that, the Houston Ship Channel will receive an additional over $70 million, which will go toward the total maintenance dredging allocation for the Houston Ship Channel. And we need far more than this, but let me tell you something, that is a great start to what we've been working on and getting. We've been authorized, we just need to have the funding. It's got to be appropriated to make sure to make this thing happen. And we also want to announce another great development. For many years, the Cedar Bayou project down in Baytown and between East Harris County and West Chambers County, and there in the Baytown region, Cedar Bayou, we've been trying to get a project's been authorized for many years, but now all of a sudden this year, I'm proud to announce that we've got full funding for the Cedar Bayou project, $32 million,
Wow.
which is going to be a huge shot in the arm, not only for the Baytown region, West Chambers, but for all of Chambers and Harris County. It's going to be an enhancement for the Houston Ship Channel as well, ships transiting on through and going up into Cedar Bayou. We've got a lot of things that are going to be happening. These funds are going to be used to complete dredging of Cedar Bayou in order to aid in flood mitigation, because you know good and well that we've had our share of floods over the last few years that have been just absolutely devastating for our economy. At Hurricane Harvey, shut the Houston Ship Channel down, and we saw spiking prices for fuel and gasoline all over this country because our ships couldn't get in and out of the energy hub that we are. Mm-hmm. And so we know that this dredging out of Cedar Bayou is going to help in flood mitigation, enhance the mobility of commerce along the federal channel. And so basically I'm here to talk about good things that are happening. I'm very optimistic on things happening and continuing to happen, and increasing our prosperity, jobs, and encouraging other industries to come in and locate in our area.
Fantastic. Well, that's some great news. I was about 2 seconds away from opening up a few of these bottles of wine to celebrate. But, unbelievable to get to hear some of the great work that's going on. I think it's fantastic for our audience to hear that as well,
right.
Because a lot of times we're in the background. We don't get to really participate and hear all the wonderful things behind the scenes, right? And so that's exciting. And just to share a little bit, I think it's important to understand. They just had a significant turnaround in Houston the other day, or a few months ago, in one of our large plants. When you talk about this traffic situation down at the port, getting ships in and out of that. They were looking at reducing the cost of guys in and out of the gates. There was 10,000 people going in and out every day. A 24-minute bandwidth of shortening of work time was worth $240,000 a day just at that level. So imagine what you just described when the ships can't get through and it slows down. I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars. So it's exciting to see that we're putting money back into it, and I think that really puts it into scale of just how much money can flow into our region if we work on that. So we appreciate the work you're doing. Yeah. Now, speaking about trade and work, you mentioned it a second ago, USMCA.
Right.
So we're a big energy producer out here, and the beauty of the energy is it used to be just relying on oil, the cost of the barrel, but now we've kind of salvaged that in the sense of because of Shell, right? We're a little bit more energy independent. But tell me about USMCA and its impact on us.
Well, you mentioned that the shale revolution and fracking and what have you has completely revolutionized American energy production in the last few years, and we have gone from I'm old enough to remember this because I remember back in the 80s when we were being told that the United States of America was at peak oil. And that meant that we had found all the oil that was ever going to be found over here. We better start getting the alternative sources of energy ready because the price of energy was going to skyrocket, go through the ceiling, and all of a sudden, with the fracking revolution, horizontal drilling, the shale, all of these developments have now made the United States energy independent for the first time in many, many decades. And we are now a net exporter to the rest of the world. Right here, we're here in Beaumont, Texas right now, my hometown, by the way, where we had several LNG facilities that were built a few years ago. And guess what they were for? To bring LNG into the United States, because we knew we were going to have a shortage of it because of this peak oil thing.
Right.
Guess what? Guess what, Jason? They're all turned around. These are exporting LNG plants now. We are selling our cheap natural gas to other people, other nations around the world, so that they don't become dependent upon Saudi oil or Iranian oil or Russian oil, and get dependent upon that, so that they can be blackmailed, actually by some of these rogue regimes.
Right.
And so I'm very proud to say that that this has really been a great boon to our region. You ask about the USMCA, the U.S. Mexico-Canada trade agreement, we think, is arguably one of the best trade treaties that have ever been negotiated. I'm very proud of the Trump administration for making this happen. I remember when President Trump was running for office, he said the worst trade deal in world history was NAFTA. He said, we had net positive trade balances before NAFTA, and now we have trade imbalances, and every country was taking advantage of us. Well, now we were told by some of our political adversaries that that will never be done. He will never be able to negotiate a new NAFTA trade agreement that will be beneficial. Well, I hate to tell you, but he just signed it into law, USMCA. That's the change that we got in NAFTA. It's going to create 176,000 new American jobs, 43,000 new manufacturing jobs. It's going to be generate $68 billion in economic growth, agricultural market expansion. Our rice farmers, our cattle growers, our manufacturers are going to be really enjoying the fruits of the labor of the Trump administration with the new USMCA trade agreement. It's going to be a real positive for Americans.
Fantastic.
And you know what? It's going to be a positive. No state will benefit more than the great state of Texas from this trade agreement. Texas will be sitting in the driver's seat, and our Gulf Coast region, the several of my district, 36, and the several other of my surrounding sister districts are going to we will benefit more than any other district in the entire state of Texas. So we're going to be sitting in the driver's seat, Jason.
That's a good place to be. So you hit something a second ago when you were talking about in essence, these are our assets.
That's right.
We're shipping these assets all over the world, and we're trying to position ourselves so that we can be independent and so that we can have opportunity. Part of that also creates conflict sometimes, and I know recently, and really for the last, I've got as many years as I can remember, we've been at combat with I guess terrorists and individuals who
absolutely
they're out in a sense to make sure that the success that we're trying to have doesn't happen. And so recently there were some transactions and things that happened when it came to national security abroad. And I think this might be a great time for you to jump in as well, Leif. We'd love to hear your perspective on that. But tell us a little bit about some of the recent transactions, things that have transpired when it came to national security, kind of our stance on that, and any feedback or thoughts that you have on it.
Well, if I could chime in real quick before my son Leif talks.
Yeah, please.
We saw the JCPOA agreement with the Iranians that President Obama's administration helped broker, and it was probably one of the worst agreements in the history of our country. This basically set them up on a path to nuclear weapons, and then on top of that, we gave them billions of dollars in cash money. Some of them took plane loads of pallets of cash, paper cash bills going from America to the worst terrorist exporting country in the world, the Iranians, and paid them. And a lot of that money, a lot of those billions, even former Secretary of State John Kerry, a liberal Democrat who helped broker this deal with the Obama administration, he said, yes, we know that some of this money is going to be used in terrorism, and the Iranians will funnel that in there. So I'm real proud of the administration for pushing back against countries like the Iranians. I think he sent the message, and Leif is going to talk about this in a minute. You kill Americans, you better get ready, because some of your people are going to meet their maker. And we saw that with Soleimani, one of the worst terrorists in world history. So I can just tell you that there's a huge national, strategic, national security hook with a lot of these agreements that we're doing, and a lot of the things that the president is trying to do to keep us safe, secure, from a national security standpoint and from an economic standpoint.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now, Leif, your thoughts? Well, look, I served for 13 years in the Navy, 9 years in the SEAL teams. I did 3 deployments to Iraq. And so I've been watching that part of the world for a long time, certainly in the Middle East. And I think, when I think about the U.S. military is an incredibly powerful organization and a great force for good in the world. There's an even greater force for good in the world, and that is U.S. economic power. Right.
And
I think we're seeing that now with being energy independent. That is something that it enables our military to be strong, but it just means simply that we don't have to spill the blood of U.S. servicemen and women in the Middle East or invest trillions of dollars in the way that we had to previously. And you've seen that from the attack that the Iranians attacked the Saudi oil facility and shut down a huge percentage of their refining capacity a few months ago, and it really didn't affect the price of oil here in America at all. It was something that us being energy independent, us being a energy exporter across the world, has real significant implications around the world. And I think from a national security perspective, we're seeing what that happens, the impact it actually has. The strike on Soleimani. A lot in the news. There was a lot of talk about that. President Trump was pushing us toward World War III with the Iranians. I think the opposite is actually true. What actually the result of that is that we demonstrated to Iran that they're not going to be able to push us around anymore. Someone like Qasem Soleimani, who was responsible for the deaths of thousands of Americans and seriously wounding thousands of Americans, that we're not going to take that anymore, and we're not going to be messed with. So I think it's actually pulled us back from the brink of war, and certainly the efforts that Dad has certainly helped support in Congress to fund our military and to equip the military. It has enabled us to regain our ability to deter enemies like Iran, so that we don't have to be in the Middle East with a giant presence that we've maintained. Fantastic.
For years. Can I say one quick thing?
Please.
An ancient anecdote. The ancient Greeks, they said it best. You want peace, you prepare for war. And our president has reinvigorated, rebuilt our military. Since Leif had his 3 tours to Iraq, and all of his men did such great things fighting Al-Qaeda, and then seeing the current president at the end of that, some of those deployments, President Obama pulling us out. And Leif told me personally, said, "This is not going to last, Dad. We've done a lot of work here. We're not using our assets right. We're pulling our folks out." And sure enough, we created a vacuum there, and look what happened. ISIS came in and set up shop, set their caliphate up, and we had to come back in under President Trump and kick them out. And we've got the same situation that's going on with the Iranians, and you know what? We prepare for war, and we will get peace out of it.
Right? Yeah, and I think, a little behind the scenes look, I was blessed enough to get to sit at lunch with you gentlemen, and one of the things that really stood out to me was, being here in your hometown, your ability to relate to the individuals that you go out and seek the voice, right? And so to have a son who's been in the trenches, as a hero who's been in the fight, right? To be the voice for our soldiers, or to be able to translate that's something special. right? Because you can actually get the inside scoop as to how those men really feel.
You're kind, Jason. I'm certainly no hero, but
Right.
I served with some incredibly heroic individuals, and was proud to do that.
Right, fantastic. So great to hear, and that's a great transition to leadership, right? We have a chance to sit in front of two wonderful leaders who spent their lives serving. Our organization, the backdrop behind Economic Alliance is that it pulls together, 9 cities, 4 counties. They're all peeled together, and you've got leaders that where egos can get in the way. But what I've seen and time again is if you're going to have a united voice to get things done for employees, the people that pay the bills, the people that pay taxes, the people that work hard out in our community, you've got to be able to unite. You got to be able to come together. So there's a lot of great leadership that takes place from our organization. We're blessed to have it, and I see it time and time again. But I'd love to hear from you guys on what some of the best characteristics, right? You've been around some of the best leaders on the planet. So tell us, what are some of the key things that stick out to leaders, so our audience can walk away and say, yeah, that's what leadership's really about, because I'd love to hear that from you.
We get asked this question all the time. For me and my business partner Jocko Willink, that when we launched Echelon Front, we've been an LLC for over 8 years now, and we've worked with every industry that you can imagine. And certainly doing a lot of work here in Southeast Texas, as well as this economic boom is actually happening because of all the things that Dad's talking about and the hard efforts that have been made. But we get asked that question all the time, and that is, what's the most important quality in a leader? And the answer is humility. Humility is the most important quality in a leader, because without humility, you lose the ability to build better relationships with people, to actually listen to constructive criticism, to ultimately take a hard look in the mirror at yourself and say, well, what could I do better? How could I improve? Is our strategy actually working? And from my perspective, that's one of the things I admire most about my dad and his leadership and the example that he set for me from the time that I was a kid, which is that he exhibits that humility, and he knows that it's not going to be a small group of elite politicians in Washington that dictate what's going to be the good of the nation. That actually is a recipe for disaster. In fact, it's far better to have a representative there who recognizes that they don't have all the answers, they don't understand some of the ins and outs of some of the industries, to, as Dad so often does, to reach out to key leaders in industries to understand what some of their challenges are, how we can develop legislation to actually solve those problems and win. And I think that's something that I admire most about Dad and his leadership in Washington. And that's a quality that I think any leader can emulate, is the ability to put your ego in check, realize you don't have all the answers to everything. You actually need to go ask and seek constructive feedback and guidance from people, and then understand what the second and third order effects are of a policy you're going to put in place, and how that can actually contribute to your troops out there succeeding.
Fantastic. So I think if anybody hasn't read the book or listened to the audio, they're missing out, because the core principle behind that of extreme ownership is looking in the mirror and not out the window. You've got to be able to take self-reflection and be humble, and you just hit the nail on the head, right? These guys are relying on you, and so for those leaders that are out there listening, they should tune into it, reach out to Echelon Front and get a better understanding of how you guys can help add value, because it's really truly a culture shift, right? A mindset shift, and it starts with you. So, gentlemen, I appreciate your time today.
Thank you,
Congressman.
Jason.
Is there anything that we want to say to the audience before we tune out?
Well, Jason, I just want to say thank you to you and the group that you all are working with, and all of the industries that are participating in this, and the opportunity to be able to do this podcast. And it's kind of ironic. Leif's thanking me as his dad for setting a good example, but now the dad is learning from the son in many respects here, and I want to thank him as well. And I'm sure that the same thing goes with a lot of us, but I really appreciate the leadership, because I'm going to tell you something. I talked about old sayings. There was an old saying. This was attributed to Alexander the Great, and he was talking about adversaries and war and victories and what have you. He said, "Listen," he said, I would much rather face an army of lions led by a lamb than to face an army of lambs led by a lion." Leadership is the key. And having a humble leader who listens to wise counsel. You can open up the book of Proverbs and the Bible, and you can hear all of these great precepts where wisdom comes from. And having wise counsel, I believe, is something that we all need to have. Once you start feeling like you've got it all figured out, you're in trouble. Right. You better watch out. Your company's on the way to problems. Your country, your state, your city, your county, or whatever your industry is, better watch out. And you want humble people who listen to those who are wise, because we don't know all the answers. We can't have all the answers in all of these various and myriad issues and levels of knowledge, so we have to reach out to others. So,
amen.
Thank you, Jason.
Leif, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. Guys, we appreciate you for joining us today. It has been a pleasure to be with these gentlemen. We would ask that you tune in next week. Always, you can give us feedback at the Economic Alliance website. You can go to our LinkedIn page or contact us directly via LinkedIn, myself and my co-host Clint Aiken. So we're looking forward to seeing you guys next week. Thanks.